this moment, I give all glory to God as the great communicator. It's time to connect again with some more laws of the universe that I've been doing as a series. This talk will be about the law of increase, part 1. Do you know that we could easily call this the law of praise, because whatever you praise grows and increases. I don't care if it's a plant or money or your own self-esteem or a person's self-esteem, and that's really what this lesson is all about as we get into it. So you could listen to it and think it's been called the law of praise, and that's okay, but actually we're talking about the law of increase. I think everyone wants an increase in their life and things in their life, would you not agree? And I would suggest that without exception, everyone here has read or heard the delightful story of Aladdin and the magic lamp. The story of how a little boy stumbled upon a genie who led him to find a dusty old lamp. It was a magic one, and when he rubbed it briskly, a little man appeared out of the cloud before him, saying he was there to grant his wishes. Now, we as children have always dreamed of fairies and the beautiful things in life that we wished we might have. And yet many of our dreams have remained that, just dreams, because we didn't do anything about them. But you know, in truth, we may not believe in fairies actually, but there is a principle that operates in our life that is equivalent to this magic lamp. It's not something material, anything material out there. It's not the magic lamp that we carry around it, but it's an understanding, a connection to the oneness, expressing of the Christ consciousness. And this understanding enables us to use this law of increase, how to work with the law, be in harmony with the law more clearly and in a more amplified way. And using this, we stimulate our good inside of our lives, and we bring about everything that's required for us to live a life that is deeply satisfying, greatly fulfilling, and difference-making. Aren't those great words to express, to have a life like that? So the understanding then is in the act of praising. When we praise, we move into a deeper understanding, a greater understanding through the practice of that praise. The method is more exquisite than one might think from a surface look at the power of praise. The method of the Course is not new. It's been used through all of history and all tradition, but praise has been a common method. It's been employing all sorts of good in our life, whether we believed in it or not. In early history, we learned that they would bring their sacrifices and place them on the altar to gain favor in the perceived idea of God. In that act, they would render their praise in song or ceremony. And believing that they did so, they would be favored by the gods and their prayers would be granted. Now, it wasn't the sacrifice that made the difference. It was their belief, of course, that made the difference, as it is for all of us. But when one praises, one moves into an amplified feeling of gratitude and appreciation. Very powerful words that we want to express too. Gratitude and appreciation for all that we have in our life. When we put our money into the bank, we want that money to appreciate and grow bigger, don't we? And when we move into a feeling that is a spoken appreciation for anything, the energy of attraction actually gets bigger within our lives. There's been some recent research done lately at Penn State University into what happens in a person's life when they feel grateful, and what happens in a person's life when they actually speak that gratitude. And they found that actually putting it into words brings about a greater experience of one's own well-being that can actually be measured in blood pressure, heart rate, and actually the cellular response to the circulatory system and the proper balance in cholesterol in the body. Our body is an amazing biofeedback machine. It's the body of communication, and it's always communicating to us anything that's going on with it. So that's why praise is very important to use for it. Because when we live in this state of praise and gratitude, especially when it's spoken, we are always looking for the good. When we look for it and we see it and we praise it and we speak it out loud, not only does it become bigger, but it goes throughout our whole bodies in a greater way. Our bodies hear it. There's actually a vibration to praise. I talk about how everything is vibrational energy, and so praise has a certain vibrational energy to it as well, that our bodies thrive in. Keep that in your mind, that it thrives in when we hear all good things. In fact, gratitude is called the master vibration because it creates so much. We learn and know that everything is interconnected. All there is the oneness of everything in life, and everything vibrates When we look at matter in its subatomic form, we find that it's not matter at all, but vibrating charges of energy, because that's all life is energy. So we think of it as hard matter because that's how we've been told it is. That's how our human senses perceive it. But it's actually just energy. Furthermore, it is ourselves who choose our own energy of vibration, and it shapes whatever we experience in our life. Our life is up to us. We get to create whatever it is that we want. And think about that. If we use more vibration and we state it in gratitude and so forth, and feel that vibration in our life, what are we creating outwardly? It's a well-known fact that when a child is criticized and grows up with criticism, and I know this, they are very insecure. When a child grows up with praise, they become confident and self-assured. And I've often found that the school system would start, if they would start to use this concept of praising the ones who, for things they get right, instead of using those red marking pens and going, oh, you missed this and red, praise more. Look at what's going on. We have a tendency to find fault right off the bat. Our mind wants to look at something and complain rather than praising first, and then going to, maybe I have a suggestion for this or that. So let's let our attentions always be drawn to the good that we do and what we're praised for inside of ourselves and what other people are doing. And when we do, we're going to have a bigger, stronger image of ourselves. We're connecting to the oneness of God when we do that. We're expressing the Christ consciousness. It's been said that praise is an avenue of prayer through which spirit expresses itself. So we got to remember, it's spirit also expressing the praise that goes through us. Praise is a broad highway. If you could visualize a broad highway, while other forms are only feeding arteries. That paints such a beautiful picture to me when you see the highway of praise and all the little arteries of everything else that comes into it. The law of truth is inherent law that when a person praises, they open themselves up to God. God is inside of us, in everyone. It lifts their consciousness to a higher realm, the Christ consciousness. And it becomes a greater channel to receive the good that's out there and willing and able to come to us from Source. Praise opens a little door in one's mind that enables them to draw closer to God. So think about that it just opens ourselves up to God more when we praise. Why would we not want to do that more often? And when we do it, we are attuned to the divine forces within us and about us. Praise is the shortest route to complete any demonstration in our lives. And that's what our goal is this year, demonstrating through new thought. And that's a form of it, praise. It's the quickest way to enjoy the prayer of effect. Praise expands and opens our mind ever upward, while its opposite, condemnation, contracts and restricts and pulls us inward. So we have the choice. We want to go out more, or do we want to go in more? The whole creation of life in the world responds to praise. We might use the example of an animal trainer. After each performer at their charges, they give them a pat and some morsel of food that they especially like to tell them they did a good job. And the trainer is wise in using that to bring out the best work from their charges and to give the best performance. Maybe you've seen instances where in customs, when somebody's coming through customs into the United States, and the custom people there, one of the officials might have a little dog that goes around sniffing everything, all the bags, looking for drugs or food that they carried in or other stuff. And when that little dog smells something, it sits down and it's charged. The human comes over and they look at it and they take something away from the person. There's something in that bag. The dog sat down when it smelled it. And sure enough, they found something. And what do the charges do? They take food out of their pocket and give it to the dog. What a great job you did. Maybe we ought to start doing that ourselves all the time. When we're around people, carry food with us and say, wow, that's a good job you did. Let's praise you. When I lived in Albuquerque, I became friends and a student of a man named Daryl Rutherford. He was a self-made millionaire from a business he'd had earlier. And he was now involved in New Thought, and he actually wrote the book, Being the Solution, which was the first time I learned this whole aspect about be, do, have that I talk about here. He created a course based on that information that I helped co-teach in seminars that we had all across the country. He and I would meet weekly to share information with one another and for me to learn more from him as a student. And I helped him at that time write another book that he titled To God or As God, which is a great book about how we say prayer. Are we saying it to, or are we praying as God? Well, during that time we met, we used to meet once a week at a restaurant, and he told me how when he started studying these laws more and he gathered information to write his first book, that he did a process. That he'd help some waiter or waitress that he had met earlier double or triple their tips within 30 days. And I asked him, how did you do that? And he said that he had measurable results. When someone would come to his table as the waiter or waitress, he would ask them after a few minutes if they would like to double their tips in 30 days. And without exception, of course, they all said yes. And he would tell them they'd have to be willing to do a couple of different things. First, do exactly what he told them to do. And secondly, give the results back to him in 30 days. And then he tells them the secret. There's two parts to it. The first part was to keep adequate results so they could keep a record of the tips they were getting as they received from the last week and then start the new one. And secondly, and the biggest part of it, is starting from that point on in approaching every single table to send praise to everybody that sat at the table. A silent wave of praise, wishing that family well, acknowledging them and their story without even knowing what was going on in the family's life or a couple's life or a businessman's life. But coming to the table and holding the thought and sending praise for the good they might doing, the good they seek to do, or to ease the struggle, to praise them and wish them well in their life. Don't you think we ought to do that more often? Oh, yeah. And then to do their normal job without saying a thing. But internally, every time they approached the table, they were to send a wave of praise to the table. And he told me that without exception, the person to whom is the serving person would write or call him back and tell him their tips doubled or tripled within 30 days. So he kept getting the proof all of the time. And after that, they also began to enjoy their jobs a lot more, which affected everybody else in the restaurants. Isn't that cool? So he was talking to me about it. He said, well, let's try it here so I could see how it works. So every time we went, we had the same waitress that came in, and he said, so he brought her over and said, would you like to double or triple your tips in 30 days? And she said, well, of course. So he went through the process. I'm sitting there watching him, and he says, take a record of your tips and then sit there, and then when you go there, I want you to praise them. And I watched her reaction at first was like, what? Because it's something a little bit different. But he asked her whether she wanted to do that. She said yes, and over the next month, we checked with her every week when we went there, and she tripled her income within 30 days. I was like, wow, this is really cool. So it was wonderful to watch how that energy changed, because not only did she do it, but she began to tell her fellow waiters and waitresses, and one of them came over and talked to us and said, tell me how I'm supposed to do this. So the energy was spreading throughout the restaurant. When we are praised or praise others, there's this physical response within our bodies. Doctors tell us that our bodies respond to the law of praise and acceptance. They expand in strength and capacity and even in intelligence. Of course, we know that it is the one mind of God working through every cell that causes this expansion, and we're just opening up and allowing it to be within our bodies. Just as water expands into power when it's heated, or it retards into ice when it's chilled, the spirit of the law of spirit is reflected in the law of physics. Though we may not sense it or fully understand it, our thoughts are constantly moving around in this invisible ether, and our thoughts are either increasing or decreasing as we spend time with it in our power and intelligence. So, beloveds, when we take time to praise the richness and the opulence, I love that word too, the opulence of God, and realize that we can have it in our own life, the law that's in the universe that says this is how it works, then our thoughts are increased in the mental atmosphere and the ethers around us, because our thoughts go out and spread out. This is increasing our effects in our being. It reflects everything that our hands or our mind may touch in our life. Simple thing as praise. So to close, let me read something from It's Up to You by Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind. The creative law cannot refuse to fill the form that our thoughts give it. Picture that in your mind's eye, that we're filling a form. It does not know good or bad thoughts. It knows only to multiply and return to us that which we create in our mind. We cannot hinder the law. We cannot express freedom when we are in bondage to negative beliefs. I believe this is saying that we are responsible for our situation. Oh, wait a minute, that was the end of the quote. We are in bondage to negative beliefs. So what this is saying is that we cannot express freedom when we are, and that we are responsible for our situation in our life. We can't blame anybody else for what's going on in our life. If I believe that there's not enough, guess what? There won't be enough. But if I believe there's more than enough, there will be more than enough. If I believe that the answers to a good life are hidden from me, then they are. But if I believe that they're open to me and I get to use them all the time, that will be true. If I expect pain, guess what? I will experience it. If I expect healing, I will find that too. And it's sometimes difficult to experience healing when you're sitting there in pain. And it takes a lot of work to change the thoughts around that. So to continue it, there's a friend a while back who shared his story. He told me, some years ago, I had bone spurs on my heel, enough to be painful. The bone doctor tried orthopedic shoes, steroid shots, nothing worked. He told me to come back when I was ready to do surgery. Then I was talking to a friend who's a reflexologist, and he said, I can heal those bone spurs in 6 weeks. Well, it took 7, but they were completely gone, and I haven't had any reoccurrence. Why? My belief in his ability, along with his belief in his ability, changed the whole outcome. My belief in the doctor before was my disbelief, and that was pretty strong as well. So I'm glad I chose this one. Our body, the objective manifestation of the invisible principle of life, is always an effect. Again, our body is an effect of what our thoughts are, what happens in our life. It's not the cause, it's the effect. So if we were to change the conditions in our body, our only alternative is to go back to the cause in our mind and change it there, because everything is a spiritual solution. So I ask you, beloveds, what thoughts and beliefs do you have about your own bodies? What are you reinforcing in your life? What thoughts and beliefs do you have about your own prosperity that you're reinforcing? What thoughts and beliefs do you have about relationships and love that you're reinforcing? So this next week, next 2 weeks, I want you to begin praising everything you can. Wherever you're out in the world, praise yourself for what you're doing. Praise your coworkers, your family, your waiter or waitress. Praise the flowers or the plants. Anything that's going on, and follow the law of increase. And when you send that praise outward, be open to it returning back to you, magnified even more. Ready to take it on? Yes. Good, do it. Save your spot here for 2 weeks. Come back and we'll see how it happened. Namaste.